This is Mario Nafal's 69 X Minutes. I'm Erin Molan. Thank you so much for joining us. Just the biggest headlines, the boldest investigations, and the wildest stories straight from the X trenches. You won't find anything here anywhere else. It's real news, it's real fast, so let's get into it. Tonight on 69 X Minutes, a mechanical engineer gives up a six-figure career, drains his savings, and loses vision in one eye, all to build a zero-gravity water system that works in a vacuum. Now he's calling on Elon Musk to launch it to Mars. But while some are building for the future, others are being crushed in the present. Just across the border, an American citizen is tortured and executed by the Iranian regime. His body returned in a casket. His daughter says both the US and Germany turned a blind eye. And the war on truth, it's gone digital. Europe's new laws force platforms like X right here to censor or face billion-euro fines. AI won't touch sensitive topics. Journalists are hitting firewalls, not answers. This isn't content moderation, it's narrative control. Meanwhile, markets are teetering, currencies swinging, and one of the only economists who predicted the 2008 collapse says this isn't just turbulence, it's the start of something much worse. But during all this, a former Marine takes aim at a global crisis: bad eyesight. He's keeping his sight on stuff that still matters. He's built a $5 vision kit. No doctor, no prescription, just a shot at clarity for millions. From our latest series, we have another look at this week's episode of Debate Club. Stay tuned to see who goes head-to-head this week. And as AI reaches escape velocity, Vinod Khosla says we've crossed the threshold. Fusion is coming. Robots, well, they're taking over. And within a decade, most jobs will vanish. The signs aren't subtle. The future's breaking in. And we've got all the stories that prove it. Plus, in my take, well, the all-female space mission. Was it really about the advancement of women, or was it something a little less noble? All this coming up. This is Mario Nafal's 69 X Minutes.
This form of intelligence is already training itself where slowly it no longer requires human input. And that's where I worry that algorithmically we may not have the ability to build anything in anymore.
Disruption is a lot of fun to talk about, do on podcasts. It's not a lot of fun to be disrupted. And when those are human beings, you sort of have to worry about how you take care of them. 2030s is when you see an acceleration where I think elections will be won or lost based on positions on AI and job displacement. And you will see job displacements. The BPO industry will be completely displaced. Customer support will be displaced. There's large chunks.
You said when AI replaces jobs, it's 100% clear that people that don't adopt AI will be obsoleted by those who do. Just for the average person listening to this, what does that mean to their everyday life, and in what time frame are we looking at?
2030, much faster development of AI capability. And I'm at the much more optimistic end, though I think there's people who are much more optimistic than even I am about how fast AI capability will evolve. And I think we'll see the productivity pass through 2030 will cause large-scale displacement and huge income disparity in the 2030s. And by 2050, this will look like great abundance for those countries that allow it. Realize most of the jobs, even in this country, aren't great jobs. That's servitude. That's not a job. If you're a farm worker or a GM assembly line worker, putting a tire on a car for 8 hours a day for 30 or 40 years, that's servitude. That's not a job.
Sure.
That's human servitude. And I think this need to work to have this basic standard of living will go away. People will work because they want to work and work on the things they want to work, irrespective of its economic value to society. This is, in fact, this opportunity to free up humanity away from that servitude, which is the reality of a job for most people in this country. Assembly line work, farm labor work, cattle farm work, you name it. It's trivially easy by 2030 to imagine China providing free doctors to the whole planet, free tutors to every child on the planet, and using essentially free goods and services to spread their political philosophy. There's a battle for which political philosophy dominates the world in 15 or 20 years. It will be hugely enabled by strength in AI, which will determine economic strength. We will have competition with China, and whoever gets AI will get economic power and military power.
So does that mean we're going to a place where AI will essentially make military decisions as well?
I think people have an objection to AI making military decisions. I think it should.
And we have, again, but we don't have any choice, because if China does that, then they have an edge, so the US has to do that.
Yeah. You can be much faster than go through a command and control structure. So where the boundaries are, we will have to evolve. I mean, many things in a highly uncertain world are not predictable, but they are evolvable, and we evolve. The battle for the minds is probably the more important battle. I think most people think in very traditional, like, do we have enough cobalt or lithium or copper? I think the world won't be constrained by physical resources.
That's a beautiful world. So when I said you're an optimistic person, I agree that there's two forms of optimism here: how fast this technology is moving, and I agree it's moving a lot faster than any of us anticipate. But I'm referring to is that how the future will look like. And my fear is that in the short term, we will see abundance. We will redefine what it means to be human, which you've talked about 25 years ago in New York Times. But what worries me is that for the first time, we will no longer be the most intelligent species on this planet.
The human brain is easily hacked by complex algorithms. Facebook's algorithms can do it. The difference between Facebook's algorithms and Google's algorithms for advertising and TikTok is Facebook and Google have economic purposes, very clear intent. TikTok nominally says they have economic purpose, but I believe has much larger goals. Now, the optimistic side of me says every human will have an AI agent that protects them and say, do you really need to do this, or does this align with what you want to do with your money, your goals, your life?
But I want to take it a step further. If you said, these algorithms will be able to hack our brain, already they're doing that. Could it hack someone's brain to make it fall in love with it?
Almost certainly movie Her will happen. It's happening today. There's a company called Replica, if you know about Replica. The company then has to decide where to set boundaries on how far it can go with falling in love into not safe for web content. But look, that's human emotions. There's no question. People are already more addicted to TikTok than their partner. They want to talk to TikTok or spend time on TikTok versus their partner. This is not. Hopefully, we have guardian AI that opposes the persuasive AI, but I do think this will happen. To what extent do you go where it reduces loneliness, which would be a good thing?
It cures depression. There's a lot of good things that come from it.
And then at some point it becomes so addictive, you stop everything else. What's the right balance? And there's, of course, what you love over the short term. And so how do you trade off the short term versus long term? These are complex questions.
Are millions going blind just because they can't afford glasses? Kevin White says it's worse than that. A former Marine who ran aid programs for the Pentagon. He saw the crisis up close. Kids falling behind in school. Adults losing jobs. Entire communities, left in the blur. So he built a fix. The UC Vision Kit. No doctor, no prescription, no massive price tag, just vision restored. This isn't just a medical solution. It's a quiet global rethink of how we see access and each other.
January of 2005, we'd set up a hospital in Morocco. But one of the things they were doing was eyeglasses. They were using an autorefractor, you know, that little electronic machine, taking the measurement. And I watched a young woman go through the process, and they got a refraction. They put her glasses on her face, and she didn't like the prescription. And I thought, you know, these are glasses. They're going to help you, but you never underestimate the power of fashion. Nobody wants to wear something that makes them look stupid. And these were like massive 1982 Farrah Fawcett glasses with like rhinestones on them. And she's an 18-year-old girl who like needed glasses but didn't want to wear those. So she picked a frame that she liked that wasn't her prescription. She put them on her face, couldn't see, moved them to the end of her nose and walked out. And I said, man, there has got to be a better way. But what I found out was basically, through follow-on research, only 35% of the world has access to eyeglasses. 65% do not have any, and it's the world's largest unmet disability. It causes, more traffic accidents than anything else, poor vision. It causes loss of education. About kids who need eyeglasses and don't have them lose about 50% of their education. They retain about 50% less than kids that don't need eyeglasses or have them. I mean, it's just a massive, massive problem that exists in most of the world. I tried to find some kind of snap-in glasses, so something that you could take a prescription and then pop in a lens, and that didn't exist. This wasn't in my mandate, by the way. It's just something that really bugged me. This was just something that's kind of sat in just like, how do we address this? So I found a guy, a professor, Josh Silver. He's an English professor who'd invented this fluid-filled pair of eyeglasses, and they're perfectly round, and they have two thin membranes, and you increase and decrease silicone pressure, and you change the shape of the lens. So you can make a minus lens or a plus lens just by turning a dial. And what we found is they worked really well to find the right prescription, but we still had that aesthetic issue, that like nobody wants to wear them issue. So when I retired, but I really liked them, and they worked. And so when I retired from the Marine Corps, about 5 years later, I started Global Vision 2020 to kind of go that next mile. The military delivered 40,000 pairs of eyeglasses, but the need was 2.5 billion. So there's still a big need, and it wasn't really being addressed. So I started using this technology to deliver more eyeglasses, and then I quickly came to the realization that nobody wants to wear these. Everybody wants real eyeglasses. We've got two ways to refract, two ways to get the prescription. One is the conventional way with optometrists with, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 worth of equipment, the big phoropter, and get the prescription. But you end up with conventional glasses that everybody wants. And then the other way is self-refraction, the fluid-filled or another kind of technology, this Alvarez lens, where people can turn the dial and get their own prescription. So you simplify who can deliver it. But very, very few people want to wear those eyeglasses. So the gap was, how do you get the right prescription, but with a simple pair of eyeglasses? So I went back to my 2005 idea of the snap-in lenses, and I just created that tool that has those, that creates the same outcome. The patient can turn a dial. It naturally moves that focal length back and forth in their eye. And then they, just like a pair of binoculars, when it's clear, you turn in, you have a clear prescription. And then you'll see I have the device right here. So it has this lens bar on it with all these color codes. And if they see clearly through the green 3 and they can see 20/20, you pull a green bag out with the number 3 on it and you snap that lens into the right side. And if they dial into a red 4, you grab the red bag and pull that lens out and snap it in. So you create a custom pair of eyeglasses bespoke to that person that has the exact prescription that they need. So this all kind of came about in 2013. I just had this epiphany, no, we need to simplify the process and get real eyeglasses. So I didn't, right guy, right experience, not an optometrist, but just someone who wore eyeglasses, who was upset at the inequality or the lack of ability for people around the world to get a pair of eyeglasses. The interesting thing about eyeglasses is it's 100%, a medical necessity if you need them, but it is also 100% fashion accessory for anyone that wears them. Nobody wants to look stupid. Nobody wants ugly eyeglasses. But my point being is that, you know, that it's an industry that has to answer to two masters, and those two masters can be quite expensive. If you simplify that product, that with, you know, the product that's been around for a couple hundred years, you can bring that price way, way, way down and still provide a fantastic product that gives people what they need. It gives people 20/20 vision for distance or for near, for all the things that they need it for: safety, productivity, education, quality of life, and so on and so forth. We make the end cost of a pair of eyeglasses a little bit less than $5 a pair. So my goal, my dream, every kid has access somewhere, whether it's a $5 pair or a $100 pair, but they can go and get them, and they can just lead a normal life and be the best person that they can be.
President Milei finally terminates currency exchange controls. These controls, known as El Cepo, were imposed in 2011 by Peronist President Cristina Kirchner to stop US dollar outflows amid economic turmoil. It capped dollar purchases for people and companies, spawning a black market with exchange rates up to 200% higher than the official rate. This also disrupted foreign investments and delayed importers' payments. In 2019, after a failed attempt to lift controls by President Mauricio Macri, it just seemed impossible to do. President Milei campaigned on a free market economy, so on April 14, having secured more than $30 billion in international aid, he finally terminated it. Having the peso floating between 1,000 and 1,400, Argentines and companies can now freely buy US dollars. With markets remaining stable at 1,200 pesos, this marks a historic economic revival. Thanks to President Milei, April 14 became Liberation Day for Argentina. This is Argentina's Milei News, and that's your 69 seconds for 69 minutes.
Peter Schiff saw the crash of 2008 coming, and now he says another storm is on the way. Tariffs, market chaos, a dollar under siege. He warns the US economy is sailing blind, straight into rough waters. Entrepreneurs are scrambling. Foreign nations are adjusting course. And China, well, he says they're not panicking, they're preparing. This isn't just about trade policy, it's about inflation, recession, and a financial system built on borrowed time. Schiff says the clock is ticking, the water's rising, and this time, there might not be a lifeboat.
We never really had any legitimate economic growth, especially since the 2008 financial crisis. We've basically been living off the charity of the rest of the world. We've lived above our means because the rest of the world has enabled that. And the way the process works is we create money, the Fed creates money through QE or other programs that it has, to fund massive deficit spending on the part of the government. So our stock market bubble deflates, and because foreigners are no longer buying our bonds, interest rates go way up. So we have a massive recession in this country with much higher inflation and much higher interest rates. So we're going to experience an economic collapse, the likes of which no living American has ever seen. This is going to be a financial crisis much worse than 2008. It is a day of reckoning for years and years of living beyond our means. And it's not just stagflation. It is going to be an inflationary depression. But also it's important to recognize that U.S. stocks and bonds are going way down because our markets have been propped up by foreigners recycling their trade surpluses into our financial markets. So as the air comes out of this bubble, you got to get out of U.S. stocks and bonds because they're going way down. And of course, you got to get out of crypto as well. That's another bubble that's been supported by cheap money and speculation. And the whole Bitcoin is digital gold narrative is blowing up because it's not digital gold. If it was digital gold, it would be going up like gold is. It's going in the opposite direction because it's just digital risk. And a lot of people who were fooled into buying Bitcoin last year because they thought it was a better form of gold are in for a rude awakening because they're going to realize they gave up their gold for nothing. You know, basically like a handful of magic beans, except, you know, there's not going to be a beanstalk going up to a cloud. The middle class consumers are going to be completely priced out of the goods that Walmart has been selling because they're not going to be able to source them anymore at prices that Americans can afford. Meanwhile, Americans are already loaded up on their credit card debt, and interest rates are at record highs, like 24, 25%. They're about to head up to 30%, maybe 40%. Credit is going to contract dramatically because foreigners are going to cut up our credit cards. Now, this is long overdone. I've been pointing this out for 20 years, that we were selling ourselves down the river. We were setting ourselves up for a lot of long-term pain, and we're about to start experiencing the consequences of what we've been doing all these years and what I've been criticizing, which was outsourcing all of our production, basically selling off our cows to buy milk. And now we can't get the milk anymore, right? We want to put tariffs on it, and we don't have any more cows to produce it ourselves. So we're in a lot of trouble. Tariffs are not going to achieve the objective. What tariffs are going to do is make the industries we still have even less competitive than they are now. We need to actually produce the stuff that we're not going to be able to afford to import. But in order to do that, then we have to have much lower stock prices, much lower bond prices, and we're probably going to have to endure a financial crisis where a lot of our banks fail and a lot of depositors lose money. So there is a huge day of reckoning that we need to deal with in order to solve the problem. The alternative is that we try to blow the air back in the bubble. Trump tries to say, hey, I was just kidding. It was all an April Fool's joke. And he has to start kissing everybody else's ass. Instead of pretending that all the foreign leaders are calling him up, kissing his ass, Trump has got to start kissing some ass all over the world to try to get them to come back to just propping our economy up again. I mean, in the long run, that's counterproductive. Well, Trump is getting a lot of horrible advice from Navarro and Lutnick, but he's also getting bad advice from Bessent. I mean, I hear a lot of the nonsense that he says. He says that Trump is holding a royal flush and China's got a pair of deuces, right? He's got the game all wrong. You know, Trump's got nothing. He's drawing dead to an inside straight, you know, and China's got the nut. You know, they have all the cards because they are the surplus nation. They have the factories. They have the infrastructure, they have the supply chain, and they have the savings. They have all the important stuff. We've got nothing. We've just got Americans that want to buy stuff but don't make anything. And the only reason we can buy stuff is because the world wants our dollars that we create out of thin air that are nothing. And so if China and the rest of the world don't want our dollars anymore, then we're done. They still have all their factories. They can produce all their stuff. They don't need us to consume it. There are 1 billion people in China who are happy to consume what Americans can't afford. And not just in China. You know, the Europeans are now considerably richer than they were on Liberation Day because the euro has gone way up. So Europeans now have been enriched. They can afford to buy more Chinese products. People in South America, South American farmers are about to earn a lot of money selling the Chinese soybeans that they're no longer buying from us. And so as China trades with other countries, the people in those countries will then be able to buy the goods that Americans can no longer afford. So we have got the losing hand, not China. And the fact that Scott Bessent doesn't understand this, and he is the Secretary of the Treasury, you know, we are on the verge of a much worse financial crisis than 2008. And I will remind you that on the precipice of that crisis, neither the chairman of the Federal Reserve nor the Secretary of the Treasury had any idea it was about to happen. Yet I was out there warning as loud as I could exactly what was going to happen. And all I got in response was ridicule and laughter.
Dr. Ben Carson would like to discuss how the White House is recognising Holy Week and Easter this year versus Transgender Day under the Biden admin. Dr. Ben Carson isn't staying silent. He's sitting down with Eric Bolling to call out what he sees as a shift in America's moral compass. This year, under Trump, Easter and Holy Week are being honoured in full. Last year, under Biden, Transgender Day visibility took centre stage on Easter Sunday. Remember that. Carson says this isn't just a scheduling fluke, it's intentional. A cultural pivot, replacing reverence with politics. And for millions of Americans, that is a line too far.
All right, folks, let's bring in Dr. Ben Carson, former HUD secretary, but also one of the world's renowned pediatric neurosurgeon, really great guy as well. Dr. Carson, love having you on the show. Appreciate your time. So you wrote an op-ed, and it struck me, sir, because after 4 years of Joe Biden and this whole, hat tipping and bowing to the LGBT community, the trans community, whatnot, Donald Trump this week has spent a lot of time observing Christianity in various ways. Sir, tell us why that's important to you and why it should be important to all Americans and, frankly, all humanity.
Well, also, especially when you contrast it with Easter season last year, when the Biden administration was then celebrating Transgender Day on one of the holy days of the year, where we're looking at the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus Christ, who means so much to millions and millions of Americans, myself included. And it's so wonderful to see that in the White House. And I think President Trump actually means it. This is not show for him. I asked him several weeks ago, where are you getting all this energy from? I said, you're 78 years old. And he thought for a moment, he said, it's God. And I think he recognizes that he's there for a particular purpose, but he also recognizes that the direction of our country was very bad most recently, with all the hatred and the division and the loss of common sense, men and women's sports, all kinds of just things that make no sense to anyone. And I think part of the reason for that is because we've lost our spiritual connection. We're a different country than any other country. Our founding document says that our rights come from our Creator, also known as God, and not from the government. And I think it was those values, those Judeo-Christian values, that were essential to our rise from obscurity to the pinnacle of the world in record time. That was not a coincidence.
Not a coincidence, sir, in the juxtaposition of Joe Biden's White House celebrating LGBTQ. We have some video that we're going to show from... hold that shot for a second, Ben. This is one of our producers. Hold that shot, because that pride flag, sir, should never be flanked by the American flag. Old Glory should never be seen as subservient, secondary to the pride flag. If you can go, give me that pride flag again there. Look at that. Can you believe on the North Lawn right there of the White House, no less, the pride flag? You want to fly a flag? I'm against it on the White House, sir, but never put the American flag secondary to any flag on the pride flag. Your thoughts?
It really is a slap in the face of so many people who are Bible-believing Christians, because the Bible has some pretty substantial things to say about that lifestyle. And it also mentions the fact that Jesus died for everybody. He loves everybody. But that doesn't mean that he accepts everything that everybody does. And, we need to make that distinction. I love all people. I love gay people and trans people. But it doesn't mean that I condone what the Bible says is not correct.
Mm-hmm. And Trump very, very famously said that when that bullet in Butler, Pennsylvania, missed his brain and hit his ear, took part of his ear off, he said, and he said this since then, that he believed he had a divine mission, that God wanted him to lead the nation, lead the world going forward. Have you had a conversation with him about that?
I certainly have. And, the location of the shooter, that was a chip shot. I've had opportunity to have some training with sniper shooting, and that was a chip shot, and almost impossible to miss. So clearly there was an intervention when he looked up at that slide, and it made a huge difference.
What do you think the message is to the American people? Trump kicked off Holy Week. He went to a service. He's done the prayer breakfasts. He's gone to several different occasions celebrating Christianity in this very high holiday week. What does that mean? What does that tell you the direction of certainly the next 4 years for the country, at least?
Well, I think he's circling back to our roots, our Judeo-Christian values and roots that tell us to love your neighbor, not cancel your neighbor if they have a different yard sign. And, you know, the United States of America is much too strong to be brought down militarily. We can, however, be destroyed from within. And he fully recognizes that and is going to be taking actions that would lead us back to the values that initiated our climb to the apex of the world.
Dr. Carson, are you interested in getting back into the administration?
No, I'm helping from behind the scenes and working hard with the American Cornerstone Institute, which is growing very significantly. And, you know, I think the optimal situation is having federal government working with local and state governments, working with private organizations and faith-based organizations. That's when we found the most success when I was at HUD.
Well, we're going to leave it right there. Dr. Ben Carson, appreciate your time, and you know, have a very blessed rest of Holy Week and going forward. So thank you for joining us.
TD here with Sage Ops. Did you know that parental rights are under attack across America by the transgender industrial complex? Our latest investigation rips the veil off of New York, a trans youth safe haven state where minors can come from anywhere around the country and receive these life-altering treatments without their parents' knowledge or consent. States with laws similar to New York are Washington, California, Colorado, Maine, Massachusetts, Minnesota, Oregon. Right now, this battle is being fought by parental rights groups and activists on a state-by-state basis, when in fact it needs national attention. And the kicker is, it's all being funded by the taxpayer. Our investigation traced over $250 million to 3 nonprofits in New York since 2020 who are transitioning minors without their parents' consent. Again, this is a national issue that's not going anywhere. Please watch our investigation, please engage, and please follow. For 69 minutes, that's your 69 seconds.
When it comes to tennis, you could kind of argue that we're all computers, but at the same time, it's still the human that has to do the execution on the court. And so, you know, you have the ability for AI to augment your training ability and get better faster, but it's still going to come down to you to hit that shot and make that execution. And in the moment, you know, you're not going to have any coaching on the court. It's just you. And so obviously AI helps you get to that point. But once you're there on the court, then it's like, it's all up to you and it's on your racket, literally. So I think at least there'll be some domains like that, hopefully, where it's still like humans and we still stay true to that. But I think ultimately computers enable everybody to have an even playing field, which is not necessarily the case today.
Yeah.
Today with SWINGVISION, what's really cool is now you can just set up your own iPhone behind the court and it can call the lines for you. And so the AI is able to process the video footage on the court at like 60 frames per second, which is much better than what the human eye sees at around 24 frames per second. So it's just a much better resolution essentially of where the ball is actually landing. And so it can make calls better than the players now, which is actually quite a helpful tool. I guess if you're somebody who cheats a lot, maybe you don't like it, but in general, you know, it's assisting. And then we're building new technologies as well to provide feedback to help you improve your game as well. And that's something that maybe a human could do if they collected all the data, but it'd be like a lot of data and it'd be really difficult to do that.
Do you think it's fair then for athletes to be kind of using this technology?
I think it actually equalizes the playing field. I mean, if you're trying to go professional, for example, in the sport of tennis, like it's really hard to bring a coach with you everywhere that you go, unless you're a really top player and you have like those big sponsorships. It's not really reasonable for you to bring a coach that's going to travel with you everywhere and going to give up their whole life just to come with you, because you probably can't even afford to pay them that much. You're barely making a living yourself. So to be able to have software that can actually, you know, augment that or replace that to some extent is actually going to allow more people to be able to go up higher in the sport. You know, maybe you're growing up in like a region of the world that doesn't have like proper coaching infrastructure, and so now all of a sudden you're able to enter this sport. So I think overall it's a good technology for more people to have, and it just means more people will end up playing these sports and be able to get better a lot faster.
What feedback have you gotten from some of the professionals that have used use the technology?
Yeah, I mean, with some professionals that have been using it, you know, there's certainly, it's not quite as accurate as some of the technologies they use at the pro level because it is, you know, ultimately consumer product experience, but they still find a lot of value in the fact that they're able to save a lot of time. You know, if they're going out on the practice court and recording a match, the coach doesn't have to sift through that entire, like, several hours of footage. The fact that we like remove all the time in between the points when you're like picking up the ball or getting a water break, like that alone saves you so much time. And then being able to like catalog based on specific shots or points, like I was mentioning earlier, like I think that saves the coaches an incredible amount of time.
What people have used this technology? Some names we might recognize.
Well, I mean, our earliest investors were Andy Roddick, former world #1 US Open champion, as well as Lindsay Davenport, also former world #1 on the women's side. So, you know, they've used it a bit off and on, I would say, but they're, you know, retired pros at this point. But we have lots of college teams that use it.
Would AI be equivalent to basically steroids at that point, since you're kind of getting that boost? Are we juicing ourselves now with AI?
Hopefully it's not quite like that. I think hopefully it's more like GPS or the smartphone, and it's hopefully like strictly better in most ways.
Yeah.
But hopefully it's like net positive. I'm still optimistic about it despite all the dangers of it.
Yeah.
He's not dreaming of the future, he's building it. Raza spent 30 years on gas turbines. Then in 2016, an idea hit, and it never left. He gave up his career, his savings, even the vision in one eye. After 11,000 studies, 18 months of construction, and $1.6 million in backing, he did it. A gravity-free, electricity-powered water purification system. Modular, scalable, vacuum-ready, built for Earth, born for Mars. Let's take a look.
What I have created is tailor-made for the extraterrestrial conditions. It's operating under vacuum conditions. It doesn't need any gravity. It is electrical, it is mass producible, and it is modular. This is the solution for colonization of other planets such as Mars. And apart from that, it's applicable under conditions of municipal wastewater. It's possible by the use of this technology to make households independent of the network. The market is enormous.
The water purification system you've developed has taken 9 years of work. What were some of the challenges you faced?
I had to sacrifice so many things. My career, my own resources, my savings and everything. I started to communicate with the organization, institutions, and none of them were able to even grasp of what I am talking about. Because after a while, I realized that I am too ahead of my time. From then onward, I continued to do the research for 4 years. I did almost review 11,000 articles. I have lost the vision of my left eye due to the working days of 20 hours per day and 2 years for design and 18 months for fabrication and construction. And now a group of investors which were able and eager to invest into our project. And we added up to having a pilot unit built in 18 months, totaling of $1.6 million. But it ended up to something meaningful.
You said that your invention is ready for mass production. What would it cost per unit?
It will be somewhere around $1,000 per 1,000 cubic meter per day. So if we have a 1,000 cubic meter per day unit, we need to think of something like $1 million per unit. And this $1 million per unit is much cheaper than the other available technologies. All of them are starting around 2,500 per cubic meter per day. The vision and mission which I had in my mind, it basically becomes part of the colonization vision and mission of Elon Musk. This is a nice complement to what he has created. He has created a fantastic ecosystem of technology development. So me as the inventor, I love to carry the load and give it to Elon such that he can take the rest of the industrialization phase under his leadership, and I would be thrilled to work under his leadership to finish what I have started. It's really multifaceted and extremely complicated technology development effort. Different variations of this technology by itself, given the subsystems which are defined inside, will practically swallow my next 10 years of efforts. So there are many details to be considered, to be developed. I have to have a team of people under his leadership. Those people will delve into the details. But the good news is that I have thought in advance about every single step ahead of us. So I'm practically 2 years ahead of this moment when I am talking to you. My message to Elon is, you are my hero. I dream about continuation of the development of this technology who took 10 years. And I am absolutely confident that within the ecosystem of SpaceX and XAI, this technology will save humanity on the planet of Earth, on the moon, and on the planet of Mars.
Hello and welcome back to your weekly crypto update on 69X. Bitcoin is trading around $84,000, rebounding from last week's dip below $77,000. Google announced that starting April 23rd, only crypto firms with a MiCA license will be allowed to advertise on its platform across the EU. Crypto exchange Kraken recently launched a platform that offers commission-free trading for over 11,000 US listed stocks and ETFs since acquiring NinjaTrader last month. Concurrently, the company is restructuring its workforce, laying off hundreds of staff to streamline operations ahead of a potential US IPO. Kraken also announced that it will list Binance's BNB token on its crypto exchange on April 22nd. Save the date. Meanwhile, the SEC's Crypto Task Force is hosting a roundtable to discuss the custody of digital assets, a critical issue affecting both traditional financial institutions and decentralized finance firms. Could these developments signal a new era of integration between traditional finance and the crypto world? And that's it for this week's recap on 69X. Thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe.
And this time, it's wearing a suit and tie. The Digital Services Act and AI Act are now in full force. The stated goal, online safety and ethical standards. But behind the buzzwords, a very different picture. Platforms like X here have already deleted over 700,000 posts to dodge billion-euro fines. AI tools are being silenced, programmed not to question the narrative. And even journalists are running into walls just trying to search. This isn't about safety, it's about control. Javier Villamor, a journalist tracking this crackdown, joins us now.
The DCA, the Digital Services Act, is a regulation focused on regulating digital platforms like, for example, social media, search engines, and marketplaces, especially focused to big companies. It was implemented February last year, and it focused especially very large online platforms. They call the VLOPs. And those companies are those with over 45 million monthly EU users, only here in the European Union. It affected mostly, for example, American and Chinese companies, for example, like Meta, Google, or X. But also, in February, it extended to all firms, so to all companies that somehow works in this digital ambient, this digital atmosphere. They are also affected by this law. The EU frames it as a tool to tackle illegal content and protect users. We know what it really means, but it effectively creates oversight system like a big brother system. National data services coordinators, there will be in every state members related directly to Brussels, to the European Commission. They decide what is safe, what is not safe. Question that raises up of mandatory here is if this truly is about security or a way to shape digital discourse. I want to relate to what happened in 2016, almost 10 years ago. In that year, was the first victory of Donald Trump. It was the no that the people voted in Colombia against the pact with the terrorists of Las FARC. And also it happened the Brexit. And I remember that year, Angela Merkel, the former German chancellor, who said that the so-called fake news were affecting the safe atmosphere for democracy. And that's when they started to plan what we are seeing right now. So we can say that somehow the Digital Services Act and also the AI Act are some legislations that help the European Commission to control the narrative, to control the discourse online. It is the only way they have to control freedom of expression, freedom of thought, because in all the state members in the European Union, little by little, all the conservative forces are having more and more power in each campaign, and they want to prevent that. Let's see what happened recently in Romania. Let's see what happened recently in France. They are really afraid of losing control, and somehow these legislations helps them to prevent any case in the future. How it affects the companies. The DSA imposes strict obligations on digital platforms. And for example, they force them to moderate content. The annual reports on the removal of illegal content with tight deadlines necessitating automated systems or dedicated teams. So in both companies and in the European Commission, there must be two teams controlling the content and all the time having meetings to know what exactly going on. For example, in 2024, X reported removing almost 700,000 posts under these rules. So the European Commission is forcing the company to erase the content. Let's have in mind that if you do not erase the content and the European Commission is asked you to erase, you can be fined up to 10 billion euros per year. That is crazy, but that's the only way that these American companies have to have their business here in Europe. When Grok appeared in the market here in the European market, it was completely based. It was completely unbiased. It was amazing to use. It was ironic, sarcastic. But in the last months, since this DSA was applied to the whole European Union and in this level we have been talking about, Grok has changed a little bit. In the beginning, you can ask everything to the AI. There were not that much restrictions. But now when you are asking tricky questions, and by tricky questions, I mean, different questions than the usual questions you can find in the legacy media, they say, or Grok says, or other AI says that I don't have the permission to answer these questions. So, for example, we know this affect in the everyday life, and also, for example, what the European Union level as hate speech. Because again, what is hate speech? Some terms are vague, defined, so it's easy to be abused by the political power. And this is a problem not only for normal citizens, let's say, but for example, for journalists like me, because when I try to find some information, some tricky information or some information that can damage, let's say, or harm the actual state of power, it doesn't allow us to reach to several search engines, for example. Apart from the DSA Act, we have in Europe the AI Act, and more or less we can say they act in a parallel way, right? They are not the same, but they help each other because AI is digital platform. This AI Act was passed on March 2024, also last year, and is the world's first comprehensive AI law. At that time, the former commission, Thierry Breton, celebrated this act as the first World AI Act, right? And I understand that it also, as this DSA, there are two sides. There are the pros and the cons, and the main objective is to regulate and to minimize the possible abuse of the AI against the citizens. In the face, for example, of Chinese AI acting in the EU and gathering information that can be used against the EU, for example, but also in the case of the United States, everyone knows that the real money nowadays is the data. Everyone collects data every time they can. So this AI Act prevents these kind of behaviors from these programs. The European AI Office launched also last year in Brussels. The objective is to oversee with national authorities. There must be collaboration between Brussels and the member states. The EU calls it ethical, but it could be a bit to lease a technology that might outpace its grip.
Hi, my name is Matt Tardy. I'm a retired Green Beret and host of the Speak the Truth podcast over on YouTube and here on X. Over inside of the Middle East, things are heating up significantly. The peace talks inside of Gaza have failed between Hamas and the Israeli government. Now, Iran has been developing, allegedly, nuclear weapons, according to the United States of America. Over inside of Congress the other day, they said that Iran had hundreds of pounds of 60+% enriched uranium. Because of that, we've moved a bunch of our strategic bombers over to the Middle East. We have at least 6 B-2 bombers staged down in Diego Garcia. Now, each one of those bombers is capable of carrying up to 80 500-pound bombs. That is a lot of boom boom that can get dropped over inside of Iran. We've also moved F-18s into Jordan, and out of the PACOM area of responsibility, we actually moved an entire aerial defense battalion over into CENTCOM. So now we have Patriots that are just scattered across CENTCOM. We also moved additional ones into Israel. With the peace talks failing inside of Gaza and Iran getting closer to develop a nuclear weapon, we are expecting a strike on Iran any day now. I'm Matt Tardio from the Speak the Truth podcast, and that is your 69 seconds on 69 Minutes.
What do you call it when the man who died for freedom gets returned like freight? Jimmy Sharma was tortured, held hostage, and executed by the Iranian regime. An American citizen left to die while Germany and the US did nothing. Now, Iran sent him back, not with honor, not with ceremony, but in a sealed casket, shipped like cargo. His daughter, Gazelle, isn't mourning quietly. She's gone to Berlin not to bury her father, but to confront the silence that let it happen. Because this isn't just one man's story, it's a warning.
Next week, we're going to Berlin to meet what apparently is my father. We will find out there. We don't know in what condition or who we will see in that casket. And yeah, it's just a nightmare after the 5-year nightmare of having my father kidnapped, tortured, and executed. There's another nightmare now for our family.
For those who don't know your father's story and your story well, can you take us through why he was kidnapped, what hell you have gone through as a family, where it all began?
So my father and my family, they were born in Iran, but they were raised in Germany, just like I was raised in Germany, raised in America with all of our rights. But he always looked back at the people who are there, who were trying to fight these tyrants, and he gave them everything that he could. He gave them a voice. He gave them a platform as an engineer and software developer where they could freely talk. He gave them his life at the end. He gave them his life with his movement, supporting the people in Iran and being terrorized by the regime on US soil for helping them, for exposing what the regime is doing.
Why was your dad so brave, do you think, when he would have known, just as you do now, the consequences of speaking out and fighting for the innocent people in Iran?
I think if there were no consequences, it would not be heroic, it would not be bravery, right? If it was free and safe, every one of us would do it. It is so heroic, it is so brave because he knew what will happen or what could happen. They sent assassins to Los Angeles in 2009 to kill my father, to kill our family. They sent kidnappers while he was on a business trip to kidnap him from the UAE, take him to Iran, and they broadcasted this to the world, they were not hiding it. It was like October 7th, kidnapping of people into a country and showing it to the world because they know they're safe. They know there's no consequences for what they do. So I can't answer you what took my father this bravery, but I hope I learned a little bit from him. I'm trying to step into his footsteps and be as brave as he was facing this regime and facing our own governments that are still treating these jihadists as business partners, and still trying to silence us and still trying. They're so afraid of his dead body in a casket that they don't want to support us with a funeral. They don't want any exposure. They don't want an autopsy. They don't want us to be there. They want this all to go away because it's an inconvenient truth buried in that casket there, like the truth that we've been fighting for decades.
When it comes to other hostages and other people around the world, particularly the US administration, they fight publicly generally. They are staunch in their attempts to get people home. Why was your father different, and why and how have they failed him so badly?
You pointed out the most important part. Our administrations are so deeply connected to the Islamists. There's so much money, so much lobby work involved that they want to silence us too. You know, like we're fighting against billions of dollars, oil money, and all of that kind of influence. So that is number one. And second is he was representative of a movement inside of Iran that is there to topple this regime, to take them out. You know, there's an October 7th every year in Iran. People who come to the streets are being mass executed. They don't want these people there. They want this regime to be there to exploit Iran, to exploit the resources, to buy powerful weapons, to buy terrorist groups, to dominate the region. That's the whole purpose. And my dad and his message and the people of Iran expose that, and they don't want that to be exposed.
What did the regime try and say your father had done? How did they try and justify, first of all, kidnapping him, and secondly, executing him?
So the regime, they call them criminals, they call them murderers, they call them terrorists, they call them spies for Mossad, for CIA, they call them child killers, and everything that you see right now, like that, they reverse the propaganda to make people who fight for freedom look like the bad guys, while they are the good guys that are putting criminals behind bars.
You yourself have now taken on his fight in the most extraordinary, brave, courageous way. Why are you so brave? Why are you still fighting a regime that murdered your father?
There is no other choice. Once you look at it, once you're connected to it, once you feel what's going on there and you see the truth, there's no coming back. I'm not doing it for us. I'm doing it for these people right now. You know how many sitting in these torture chambers inside of Iran, they have no voice. They're being tortured, they're being raped, they're being murdered, and there's no encampments or movements for them. So that's who we're doing it for.
We have another amazing sneak peek of our newest series, Debate Club. It's fast becoming one of my favourite shows, apart from this one, of course. Two sides, one unfiltered convo from both ends of the story. Take a look into this week's upcoming episode.
Well, the two biggest myths are that Israel started as a colonial enterprise and that it started its state through a Nakba. Israel is the most anti-colonial state that exists almost anywhere in the world. It was established through ending colonialism. There was Turkish colonialism, the Ottoman Empire, it fought against that. There was British colonialism. The Irgun blew up the head of the colonial regime, the King David Hotel. Israel fought so hard against colonialism. It was a return to a land that was Jewish, Judea, Samaria. That's Judaism is named after Judea. There has always been a Jewish presence in what the Romans called Palestine, but really had no inherent status as a state. There's never been a Palestinian state. There's always been a Jewish state. In 1830-something, when they did the first religious population of the Middle East, it turns out there was a substantial majority of Jews living in Jerusalem. And the second largest group, by the way, were Christians, and only the third largest group were Muslims. So there is no colonialism. Absolutely not. There is a dispute over land that has been historically Jewish, had Arab population, and has always been subject to potential division. Then comes the Nakba. The Nakba was completely the fault of the Palestinians. The Israelis accepted the division of Palestine in 1947, 1948 into a tiny, tiny little land where the Jewish population would be on the coastal plain in what would be like 30% of the arable land of what is now Palestine, and 70% would have been Arab. And had the Palestinians and the Arab countries accepted that, there would have been no Nakba. There would have been 50% of Haifa would be Arab, and probably much of the rest of the country. But the Arab armies invaded Israel, and Israel in self-defense obviously did not allow the Arabs who fled to come back. If that's the Nakba, it's a pretty weak Nakba, and it's a Nakba that clearly was imposed by Palestinian leadership. The last thing Israel wants ever to do is to occupy anybody else's land. For the last almost 100 years, all they've wanted is their ability to live in peace in a tiny sliver of land, which could be the only nation state of the Jewish people anywhere in the world. And over again, they've been attacked mercilessly through terrorism, through threats of annihilation, now through threats of nuclear annihilation. So, no, this is not an occupation. This is completely self-defense. It's much like what the Germans had to endure after the end of the Second World War. You don't just give back the land. You wait until there's the end of belligerency. And under international law, belligerency has to end before the military could leave a country that was captured during wartime. So no colonialism, no Nakba, no occupation, all self-defense.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Ritter, you are up next.
You know, one of the problems with this this line of inquiry on your part is that it creates a black and white notion that doesn't exist in reality. History is a very complicated thing. I would just say that Theodor Herzl in 1896 wrote a book called Der Judenstaat, in which he clearly defines Zionism as a colonial activity. And David Ben Gurion, the founding father of Israel, speaks in colonial terms when he speaks of the seizure of lands from the Arabs. He's unapologetic about it, but he does mention that that which would be unlawful in peace would be tolerated in war. So he speaks about taking the high ground, taking the mountains through war, through an act of war. And here, Professor Dershowitz is 100% correct. When you engage in war and you lose, you pay the price. And unfortunately for the Palestinians, for the Arabs, they have habitually lost. And it makes it difficult, to articulate that Israel must surrender that which it has conquered in time of war. Occupier or defender. One man's freedom fighter is another man's terrorist. It comes down to a point of view. Clearly, David Ben Gurion articulated numerous times during the foundation of the State of Israel that he understood that the Israelis were occupiers, that they had seized the lands of the Arabs. And he often said, I don't blame them for hating us because we took their land. But again, the taking of the land was through the conduct of war. To pretend that the Arab armies didn't invade Israel in 1947-48 is to be wrong. I mean, this is why I say this is a far more nuanced argument than just simply black and white, right or wrong. But today, I think when we speak of Gaza, when we speak of the West Bank, when we speak of the unconquered territories, Israel clearly is the occupier. International law has found that that is the case. The International Court of Justice has found that this is the case, and that the Palestinians are the resistance fighters. Now, from the perspective of Israel, the Palestinian resistance fighters become terrorists because of the tactics that are used, etc. But from the perspective of the Palestinians, they are resistance fighters. The Israelis are the occupiers. This is one of the problems we're going to have with the creation of a two-state solution. There is no agreement on anything between the Palestinians and the Israelis, especially when it comes to who is right and who is wrong, who is the occupier, who is the defender.
Thank you, sir. Professor Dershowitz, rebuttal, 1 minute.
Yes, you referred to Herzl's Der Judenstaat. This is the original copy of Der Judenstaat. I own that copy. It's one of the great treasures of my collection. And if you go through it, he is not in favor of colonialism. He's fighting colonialism. He's using colonialism. He's going to meet with the head of the Ottoman Empire. He's going to meet with the head of Germany in order to end the occupation and allow the Jewish people to return to their homeland. Now, in terms of occupation, let's be very, very clear. Israel offered to end the occupation completely and totally in 2001, in 2005, Gaza. they did end it in 2007. So when you've offered to end the occupation, and only in recognition of peace, and the other side says, no, don't end the occupation. We're going to continue to fight you. We're going to continue to terrorize you. You cannot call that an occupation. I don't care what any international court, which is biased, says. Israel offered to end the occupation. The Palestinians rejected it. That's not an occupation. But my final word are thank you for having this rational debate. This is the first rational debate I've participated in about the Israel-Palestine conflict since October 7th. So you're to be commended.
Now it's time for my take. And this week we were treated to an all-female mission to space. The first one in 60-odd years. A feat to be celebrated. The blood, sweat and tears these women must have shed over many decades to earn the right to be a part of it, I can't even imagine. The lifelong passion for outer space, no doubt. For atmospheric pressure, the planetary system, stars. Yes, stars. But not the kind made out of hot gas, mostly hydrogen and helium. Yes, I had to Google that. But the other kind, Hollywood types. And look, there's nothing wrong with famous people doing cool stuff. They are just as entitled as anyone to reach for the stars. But to try and frame their feat as inspirational or world-changing and as advancing the cause of women worldwide is, and I'm trying to put this politely, utterly ridiculous. Jeff Bezos is clearly a smart man. His fiancée Lauren clearly intelligent too, and by most accounts, both very nice people. If they were after publicity for Blue Origin, then good for them. Well played. They achieved it, of course. But why did they need to pretend it was anything more than that? Pop star Katy Perry and Oprah's best friend. Definitely worth a segment on the morning shows, absolutely. But the carry-on and the maybe very genuine, I don't know, belief within that they were part of something much bigger is misplaced. I have a 6-year-old daughter and I showed her the girls this week to gauge her reaction. She asked me 2 questions. Are they astronauts, Mummy? To which I replied, no. Her second question was, why is their hair out and so pretty? She thought a ponytail might have been more appropriate and practical to go into space. Now, I'm not one to criticise appearance. In fact, I defended Sanchez when she was attacked for her outfit at Trump's inauguration. But given the mission here, the suits they were wearing and the glam did nothing to demonstrate validity or this being about anything other than a photo op. The kissing the ground, pretty embarrassing. The post-mission commentary, well, questionable. But thankfully for them, there was something far more cringe than any individual antics. The rocket itself, a giant, a massive, okay, really, he is one of the world's richest men. Surely he could afford a slight modification to the shape that wouldn't have impacted on its trajectory. But that aside, it was a successful mission. The head carrying the women separated from the shaft and delivered them all safely back down to Earth. No doubt inspiring the next generation of, well, we'll leave that up to you to decide. That's it for 69 X Minutes. Presented by Mario Nafal, I'm Erin Molan. Thanks so much for joining us. No spin, no censorship, just the truth. Sometimes hard to swallow. See you next time.